So I'm really pleased to invite you to this event. This event is a joint effort by the International Service for Human Rights with our partners, the network of Chinese human rights defenders, Amnesty International, Frontline Defenders, Art for Human Rights, Human Rights in China, Humanitarian China, the FIDH and IMCT, Martin Ell's Award Foundation, the Tibet Justice Center, World Uyghur Congress, the Society for Threatened Peoples, La Société d'Amitié Suisse Tibétaine, the Hong Kong Center for Human Rights, Human Rights Watch, and Human Rights First. It is a joint effort. So I'm really delighted today to be moderating this very brief discussion with really distinguished activists that I have a pleasure to welcome here in Geneva, who will deliver remarks before we celebrate a minute of silence for Cao Shunli and for all victims of reprisals. Of course, as many of you know, Cao Shunli's story is one of immense power and one of resilience, and has inspired many here in China and globally. It has also inspired an award, the Cao Shunli Memorial Award for Human Rights Defenders, that acknowledges the efforts of human rights defenders in China, upholding the promise of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights every day on 14 March. This year, this award was granted to the grassroots volunteers of the Support the Chained Woman Focus Group, who are a group of volunteers gathered online and in person to advocate for the human rights of trafficked women with disabilities in rural China. So this is, of course, an important celebration, and today we're, of course, not only celebrating Cao Shunli's legacy, but the current and ongoing, incredibly brave work of defenders throughout the world. I will just finish by saying, of course, that the images that hopefully you will see once you have a chance to look at the exhibition afterwards are a range of stories, but there's, of course, many more. And there are, of course, all the voices of the ones that couldn't speak, that don't come to Geneva, that don't engage with the United Nations because of the chilling effect of reprisals and of self-censorship. So, of course, this event is also to speak for those that are not able to. So I'm pleased first to give the floor to our Executive Director, Phil Lynch.
Well, thank you very much, Raf, and dear friends, colleagues, and particularly those of you who knew and worked with Cao Shunli. Welcome. It's a real privilege to be gathered here today to pay tribute to her, and as Raf said, to all human rights defenders targeted by the Chinese government for their commitment to uphold the promise of human rights and the Universal Declaration. Cao Shunli was a brave Chinese woman human rights defender and lawyer. She documented abuses, she campaigned for civil society participation in UN processes, she campaigned for democracy, for public participation, for representation, and against discrimination. In an attempt to speak with Chinese government officials about China's UPR, she courageously organised peaceful sit-ins together with other concerned citizens outside of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs despite great risks. She also submitted information to the UN as well as to China on extralegal detentions as well as torture and ill treatment. On the 14th of September of 2013, Chinese authorities detained Cao at the Beijing airport as she was travelling to Geneva to participate in a human rights training. It was just 1 month before China's second UPR. She was forcibly disappeared for 5 weeks. She resurfaced in criminal detention and was charged with picking quarrels and provoking trouble. By October of 2013, it was very clear that her health in detention was deteriorating due to ill treatment and deprivation of adequate health care. And despite multiple appeals for bail on humanitarian grounds by her lawyers and calls for her freedom from the international community, she was denied treatment and died in custody under heavy surveillance, kept away from lawyers, family, friends on the 14th of March 2013. To this day, there has been no accountability for Cao Shunli's death. The Chinese government refuses to admit any wrongdoing, despite repeated calls in 2014, in 2019, and again today from special procedure mandate holders for an independent, impartial investigation into her death and accountability for the perpetrators of deadly reprisals. reprisals. Her case is one of the longest standing unresolved cases in the UN Secretary General's annual reprisals report. And I should add there that China is also one of the most consistent perpetrators of reprisals over time, as well as in terms of the sheer numbers of reprisals, one of the most egregious actors in terms of the number of individuals targeted. Cao, of course, is not alone. Her courage, but also the abuses she endured, are unfortunately those shared by many other human rights defenders who've paid a very high cost for their cooperation with the UN. The recent instances of intimidation and harassment against NGO participants in China's fourth UPR, just in January 2024, as well as further unsolicited intimidation photos by Chinese dongos against activists at ISHR's office just 2 days ago, highlight the gravity of the situation. 10 years ago, when ISHR and many other human rights organisations sought to observe a moment of silence for Cao at the Human Rights Council, the Chinese delegation, together with some other delegations, disrupted the session for over an hour and a half to prevent this occurring. This lack of accountability emboldens perpetrators of reprisals and undermines accountability. Cao's is a paradigmatic case of reprisals, not only because of the prominence of the case, but also due to the vast array of violations to which she was subject, committed with total impunity. From Chinese authorities blocking her exit from the country, to her enforced disappearance, her prolonged arbitrary detention, the lack of due process, the ill treatment to which she was subject, the deprivation or denial of adequate health care, ultimately her death in custody, and then the lack of accountability and continuing impunity. Nothing, of course, will atone for her death. Since 2014, however, her life has served as an inspiration for ISHR's work, together with that of many of our Chinese human rights defender colleagues, to strengthen protection of Chinese human rights defenders, to combat and ensure accountability for attacks against them, and to support them in exercising the fundamental right to advocate, to defend rights, and to seek justice at the United Nations in ways in which Cao was denied. Today we pay tribute to Cao Shunli and we honour all defenders who've paid the high price for their cooperation with the UN. We urge all UN member states to call for an independent, impartial investigation into her death. It must not be accepted, it must not be normalised. Cao deserves justice. Before her death, Cao said, "Our impact may be large, it may be small, it may be nothing, but we must try. It is our duty to the dispossessed, and it is the right of civil society. And we are united here today to honour that legacy."
Thank you very much, Phil. Now I would like to call on a colleague human rights defender from the mainland. Take the floor.
Hello, friends. I'm so happy to see you here today to show your support and care. I kindly ask you not to fail me. Ironically, defenders like me and many others here at the Center of Power for Human Rights at the UN, we are often followed and photographed by strange men, apparently to intimidate us and to hurt our family and friends back in China. But I must speak up because I promised Cao Shunli when we met many years ago that her voices would be heard in the hallways, in the halls, the power centers of the UN. Cao Shunli's voices are not alone. They represent thousands and thousands of the Chinese people. The Human Rights Condition Report they prepared for the UPR collected thousands of signatures and thousands of cases. They just wanted the Chinese government to consider, to include in their state report to the UPR, but they were silenced, detained, and Cao Shunli paid the ultimate price with her life. 10 years after the government deadly reprisal against her, and 10 years when the government enjoyed impunity. We have an ever more important obligation to demand justice for Cao Shunli and the victims. The UN human rights system has failed to do justice to them, to hold the perpetrators accountable. Some of the victims are here with us today in spirit on the walls of this exhibit. They're looking at us, giving us courage to speak up, to demand justice. If you look around, why so many women? Women have suffered the blunt blow of reprisals and draw little attention. While they are being silenced, jailed, tortured for seeking to cooperate with the UN, you and I still have our voices. Let's use it. You may ask, what can we do? Actually, you know better than me what you can do. Here is the thing. Push for a strong leadership in the UN system to protect human rights. Dialogue in dark rooms must not replace speaking publicly to stop atrocities. Treating a powerful Chinese state with quiet engagement, practicing self-censorship, is applying double standards and playing geopolitics with human rights. Holding the Chinese government accountable for its commitment to its UN and Human Rights Council membership pledges, for its treaty obligations, protecting the people in China from the Chinese government, from its repression, is not bashing China. The UN human rights system must not only be vigilantly guarded against the aggressive assault by governments like China, but also guarded against complacency, lethargy, naivete in its own ranks. And the system must be strengthened and reformed in order to have any credibility, to give hopes to victims and their families. It is challenging and it requires courage, but you can do it. We can do it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now I call on Sophie Luo, who is a human rights activist, fearless human rights activist, and also the wife of Chinese lawyer Ding Jiaxi, who is one of the stories that are here in this exhibition today. Sophie.
Hello. Thank you everyone for coming here. Thank you so much standing with us, behind us, to be solidarity with us. I start my talk, maybe I introduce myself. I am a professional, my profession is engineer. I'm working for a railway company. But right now, I decided to devote myself to the cause of human rights. In the past, I start my activism since April 2013, when my husband Ding Jiaxi, a human rights lawyer, firstly detained because of he speak up for people, because of he advocate Chinese citizens to practice the rights written in the Chinese constitution and the laws. So because of that, he was firstly sentenced 3.5 years. And after he served his sentence, he continued to advocate nonviolent protests, connect Chinese citizens, and then in December 26, 2019, he was first disappeared, tortured, and now sentenced 12 years in jail plus deprivation of political rights for another 3 years. In the past 11 years, I have been fighting for my husband's case and the case of his friend Xu Ziyong, as well as Xu Ziyong's fiancé Li Qiaochu. But starting from since their sentence, I decided to speak up, not only for these 3 cases, but also for all the cases in China. I put this image in my home on my desk, reminding me that I need to speak for mainland China, speak for Uyghurs, speak for Tibetan, Hong Kongers, for all the political prisoners, conscientious prisoners in China. I want to work for the release, for the rights for all of them, not only for my husband. This is one point. Secondly, in the past 10 years, including when I know Cao Shunli on 2014 until today, 10 years already passed, I see the worsening of Chinese human rights situation get worse and worse day by day. Under the Xi government, we lose all the possibility to work on human rights in China now. I want to say the situation getting worse and worse. However, also I see more and more people like me previously do not know too much about human rights, but we start working on it. So I want to say it's very important for us all to keep on. In the past 10 years, I see all the support from UN, from all the permanent missions speak up, including in last UPR, many countries proposed a lot of good recommendations to Chinese government. In spite of their covering of all the truths, covering of all the human rights abuses, more and more countries already see the truth about Chinese human rights situation. I want to say I look forward to your support and your continuous solidarity with us to keep this fight. And that's the only way we could see the turnaround of the human rights situation in China. In any case, what I want to say is, it's not because there is hope that we keep on. It's because we keep on that we can see the hope. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sophie. Now I would like to invite Tenzin Yangsom, please.
Hi everyone, my name is Yang Song with International Tibet Network, and I am a second-generation Tibetan, meaning I was born and raised completely in exile. And while we're here today to commemorate Cao Shunli, who paid the ultimate price for defending human rights inside China, I'm also here to highlight the 2 cases. First being Tinsdale Rinpoche. He is a Tugu, which means a reincarnated Lama in Tibetan. And he was a revered Tibetan spiritual leader and monk that advocated for Tibetan human rights as well as environmental rights. And so because of this, the Chinese government charged him with a bomb case, which was completely false. He was then put to jail and died very suspiciously in 2015. And so the Chinese government has claimed that that they gave him the correct Tibetan rights of death rites and rituals with his family, spared his ashes nicely, but we all know that that is false. And they actually did not do anything that they claimed to have done in their reports. And his niece, Nima Hamula, who actually fled Tibet in 2016, I believe just a year after his death, left behind her 6-year-old daughter and her old mother to kind of fight and talk about his case on an international stage. So she's been here in Geneva plenty of times talking about his case and getting the UN, getting other international communities to speak up for Tinsdale Rinpoche. And the second person I wanted to highlight is Deshu Wangchu, who is a language rights activist. And so after appearing on a New York Times article and documentary in 2015, he was mysteriously disappeared by the Chinese government and tossed into jail. And so he has been released just now, I think last 2 years ago now, and has been under tight surveillance for the next 5 years, but he continues to resist. And so the last couple of months, we've been seeing him going to local schools and advocating for the use of Tibetan language, because I'm sure, as many of you guys know, there are nearly 1 million Tibetan children inside residential boarding schools where they're coerced into learning Mandarin language and forgetting the Tibetan mother tongue. And so he's been doing this work since 2015 and advocating for it. And so he's still facing these really horrible issues inside China. I think even just a few months ago, there were, as he went to a school to advocate for Tibetan rights, there were a group of unmasked Chinese men who actually attacked him and landed him to the hospital, where no one would treat him at the hospital because of who he was. And so many people believe that those men were actually undercover Chinese cops. And so that's the level of intimidation that Chinese officials are going inside Tibet, inside China, to really silence these human rights defenders. And so I really wanted to highlight these two cases. And also, it really saddens me to see so many and to actually know some of the other cases that are here. For example, Yalkin Rosie, I've met his daughter and son. They live in Boston, and I grew up in Boston. So we organized together in the area to do cross-movement solidarity protests. And some of the Hong Kongers, we have Hong Konger friends living in DC who are constantly advocating for their friends to come out of jail. But as we're here today to commemorate Cao Shunli's time, I also just wanted to call on the international community to do more for these people, especially people that are still alive, including Dashi Wangchuk and human rights defenders who are in prison or continuing to rise up inside Tibet, in Hong Kong, in East Turkestan, in China. It's really important that we always amplify their voices whenever we can. So thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Yang. And last but not least, Sumata Tayarkin from the World Uyghur Congress.
Good evening, everyone. I am so delighted to be here at this really incredibly important event, representing not only my community, but also the 30 plus detained and disappeared relatives of mine. Human rights defenders are an essential part of our international ecosystem. Without them, our world would be very dark. There are many emblematic cases of human rights defenders that have been detained by the Chinese government, and Cao Shunli is one of them. In my homeland, Uyghurs simply have no space to defend human rights. Those who have tried in their own ways have paid a heavy price: lifetime imprisonment, or worse, enforced disappearance, or worse, killed. The two Uyghur cases that we have highlighted today at this exhibition, Yalkun Rosie and Rahila Dawood, shine the light on the impossibility of being an Uyghur today. Whether you are a highly educated doctor or a scholar, it is simply not enough to the eyes of the Chinese Communist Party unless you become a fully assimilated citizen without questioning the status quo. Dr. Rahila Dawood, an internationally renowned scholar of Uyghur culture, who once was recognized with awards and received research grants by the Chinese government, disappeared in December 2017. She was set to travel from Urumqi to Beijing, but she never reached her destination. Her whereabouts are still unknown to this day. She was essentially detained for trying to disseminate and transmit the understanding of Uyghur traditions to younger generations and others. Yalkun Rosie, a prominent writer, literary critic, and editor of the Xinjiang Education Press, was detained in late 2016 in relation to his work starting in 2001 as part of an official Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region Committee revising Uyghur language textbooks for use in schools. In January 2018, it was confirmed that he was sentenced to 15 years in prison for inciting subversion of state power. Rahila and Yalkun's children are in the US, advocating for the release of their parents, but every day that passes without information on their whereabouts or conditions is another day of torture. These two cases are part of thousands of Uyghur scholars, professors, doctors, religious figures, and youth that have disappeared by the government for simply defending the freedoms that are enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and all in the Chinese government's campaign to crush Uyghur identity and culture. So tonight, we honor them, we honor their work, but tomorrow we will continue the fight for their releases. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sumritai. As we're getting closer to the end of this event, I would like to call again on our executive director to bring us to the peak of this celebration.
I might ask our speakers, or those who are comfortable being filmed and photographed, to come and join me for this. In September of last year, ISHR, together with 15 other human rights organisations, sent a letter to the city of Geneva asking them to install a bust of Cao Shunli in an emblematic location at the heart of international Geneva. It would be a memorial which honoured Cao Shunli and all human rights defenders victims of reprisals in China and globally. It would also be a strong message of solidarity and a continuing reminder to states coming to the UN that reprisals are unacceptable and that the work of human rights defenders is absolutely indispensable. On my table to the right, you will find a petition which we would invite you to sign, calling on the City of Geneva to install the bust in an appropriate location. You can also find the petition online on Avaz, or also on the ISHR campaign page, or by scanning the QR codes around the exhibition. Whilst the City of Geneva is still analysing our request, we have gone ahead and commissioned a bust from Czech artist Maria Shabrova, and tonight we're very proud to publicly unveil it. So I'd like to ask my friends, colleagues, defenders to join me in revealing the bust. And I'd like to finally give the floor to my friend and colleague, Michael and Icon, for a minute of silence, a minute that Cao was denied.
Thank you, and my job is easier than 10 years ago, I hope. As some of you will remember, and it's so good to see old friends here again, and it goes to the testimony that we've heard how powerful this moment is. As some of you will remember, we tried this 10 years ago in the Human Rights Council. We tried to honor Cao Shunli with a minute of silence. And it turned into a 1.5 hour show of why this work is so important, because the Chinese government interrupted us. They said that the right to speak doesn't include the right to be silent. And it's really with great personal pleasure also that we'll defy that tonight, and we'll be silent for a minute. Thank you very much. And now it's time to raise our voices again and to keep the fight, as we've heard before. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Michael. I will invite everyone that feels comfortable to get closer to the bust, and we will take a picture in honor of Cao Shunli. So everyone that feels comfortable, please get closer, don't be shy. Thank you very much. I'm gonna turn now because the audience went from this side. But no, I really wanted to thank everyone that spoke today, everyone that showed up. I am extremely moved. I'm pretty teary, I have to say, so I have to finish speaking before it gets a little bit too dramatic. But I just wanted to end again with this quote from Cao Shunli. It was mentioned at the beginning of the event, but I just think that its power is really here. Our impact may be large and may be nothing, but we must try. It is our duty to the dispossessed, and it is the right of civil society. So let us make this moment last endlessly. Thank you for coming.